Have you ever wondered why we human beings struggle so much on this planet? Well, I'm going to share a little story with you. I call it the Tale of Three Selves. Hi, I'm Saratoga Ocean, and I help people to spiritually awaken so they can enter a conscious path of ascension. And make sure to subscribe so you catch all my videos to support you on your awakening and ascension journey. In this video, I'm going to show you something about this reality that we live in that should literally blow our minds. And I'm especially going to be talking about the ego and the shadow. Now, firstly, I think it's a little odd how we just totally accept that life is a struggle. We call it being human. So let's look at our definition of being human. Our definition of being human is the craziest story ever told. I call it the tale of three selves. Now imagine for a moment that you are on another planet reading a story to a super advanced extraterrestrial being about some people on a planet called Earth. Now, you and this other extraterrestrial being are what we call cosmic human creators. You are both completely whole and undivided and very, very powerful. You only know love and you only know oneness. You are both creators in the biggest sense of the word. So here you are, a powerful cosmic creator reading this story to an advanced extraterrestrial human. The story would go something like this. Somewhere in a galaxy far, far away, there is a rather unique solar system with a tiny, tiny planet full of life called Earth. Now, the planets in this solar system revolve around a single star, which they call their sun. Now, the most interesting part of this very tiny planet is the humans who live there. You see, they are quite confused. Even though they are each meant to be a singular being with enormous cosmic power, they have a vastly different experience and a vastly different view of themselves. They believe that being human means to be divided into three parts and then subdivided even more so. Naturally, this comes with an enormous sense of struggle. They literally spend their entire lives trying to get all three parts, along with all their subdivisions, to get along and make peace within themselves. And the strangest thing about these particular humans is that they don't really have a problem with this situation. So by now, the extraterrestrial human is probably saying, What? What do you mean they don't have a problem with this situation? So then you would say, well, they have it all explained away as what it means to be human. They call it their true nature. So yeah, even though it's completely dysfunctional, they're willing to live with it anyway. And then the extraterrestrial human might say, okay, now you're not making any sense at all. And then you might say, well, here's the thing. They have these people called experts who tell them that everything's okay, nothing to see here, just go about your lives as best you can. You were made this way, and now it's your job to make the best of it. And then the ET might say, well, now you've really piqued my curiosity. Tell me about these three selves. So then you would say, well, fundamentally, there is the ego, there is what they call the shadow, and then there's the actual real self, which for the most part is completely dormant. So of course the story would go on, the ET would just be completely flabbergasted, like, what are you even talking about? So let's put that little story aside, and I'm going to explain to you guys exactly how this tale of three selves really works. And why did I start with that little story? It's so you could have a cosmic extraterrestrial view of our situation. Because honestly, guys, that's the only way you will have a prayer of understanding what is actually going on. Okay, so now I'm going to explain exactly how this situation of three different selves actually works. Let's start with your true self. That's the you that is whole, complete, perfect, and powerful. That's the you that is 100% founded in love. So, what the heck happened to that self, you might be asking? What happened is that you entered into a false reality that was created due to a very bad experiment that took place in this universe. That experiment is what created the entire three-dimensional physical world of duality. It actually created even more than that, but let's just talk about what we're dealing with here on Earth. This was an experiment about what it would be like to not be God, to not be a manifestation of all that is. It was an experiment in blocking the light of the ultimate infinite creator. So let's talk about how that affects you on an individual level. Every single thing that is manifesting in this three-dimensional physical world is a manifestation of blocking the infinite light of the ultimate creator. And that is exactly what makes this physical world appear to be solid. See, in the physical world, everything exists in resistance to everything else. The resistance is in everything. For example, that's why I can't put my hand through this notepad. That's why when you fall down, you hurt yourself. So when you, as a singular cosmic being who is whole, enters into this reality, your true self is immediately met with the very same resistance. And that resistance starts with your actual physical body. See, literally nothing here in the physical world manifests as the full radiant expression of perfect divine light. In fact, the physical world is all about reflected light because of this resistance. And that includes you as a physical being. So your light is immediately hit by the same resistance that exists in everything that's physical. That's what your physical body is all about. See, your physical body is like something that's finite, that's resisting your divine expression of infinite light. Your body exists in resistance to your true self. And that's one of the reasons that it eventually runs out of energy and dies. So what this resistance does is it creates an alternate self that we call the ego. So you have your true self, which is infinite, one, and radiant light, and then it hits the resistance of the physical body, which kind of flips it in a way, creating what I like to call a shadow self, which is the ego. Because you see, whenever something blocks the light, it creates a shadow, right? So that's why I tend to call the ego the shadow self. Now, I'm well aware that this does not meet the common definition of the shadow. But let me explain where I'm coming from with this. The real you is met with this resistance that is inherent in everything physical. So instead of you manifesting in the physical world as an infinite being, which is what you are, you must manifest through a finite physical entity that matches the rest of this physical reality. And that's why these bodies are in the conditions they're in. That's why they're so fragile and so easily destroyed. Because these physical bodies exist in resistance to our light. And this is why it's so difficult to heal. We shouldn't have any problems with healing. In fact, we shouldn't even have a need to heal. Now, if you, the infinite being, cannot exist on this planet in the full power and beauty of who you really are, then an alternate identity must be formed. That alternate identity is the ego. The ego is the false self that is born out of this duality. It is actually like an avatar that allows you, the infinite being, to be functional in this physical space of duality. So the ego is not actually you, it's really just an avatar. It's actually a false you that by necessity has two parts. It's by necessity because this entire three-dimensional reality is made up of the principles of duality. So the ego always has two sides, darkness and light, love and hate, or good and bad, and all of the other opposites that we're all so familiar with. So now we're trying to operate with two selves instead of one. We have the real self that is the truth about you, and then we have the false self, the ego, which is the operational avatar in this system of duality. Okay, so by now you're probably wondering, okay, well that's two selves. Now what about the third self, Saratoga? Well, we get the illusion of a third self because the ego is always divided into two parts. And then each of these two parts is then subdivided into an unlimited number of smaller parts. And your job, so you're told, is to make this entire mess somehow work together. So the two parts of the ego can basically be boiled down to two things, good and bad and right and wrong. And each one of us exists as a variation of that central theme. So the ego is constantly defining and redefining what it means to be human because these two parts are constantly shifting and changing in relationship to one another. So what you need to understand is that all of these definitions are really about defining what it means to be human in a really kind of messed up situation. And that's not really human at all. So here's basically what it looks like. You have your true self, which is whole, complete, infinite, and born of love. And that self gets filtered through the resistance factor of the third dimensional physical reality. And then that creates this weird kind of almost like a pyramid structure where you have the ego, which is the director. That's the voice in your head that tells you all the stuff. That's the ego talking. The ego is split between the good self and the bad self, and the ego is constantly instructing you about how to make those two things kind of work together. So the ego ends up being in charge of telling you what to do to make these two parts functional in the physical world of duality, and you get so overwhelmed with that situation that your true self just kind of has to take a back seat. Now, the ego's definition of what it means to be human is all about what you must endure. It's not about expression, it's not about life, and it's not about creation. It's about endurance. So the ego gives us a job. The job is to try and figure out a way to integrate its two parts. It's to try and integrate its two opposing sides. And that is fundamentally impossible. And that's why we as human beings on planet Earth struggle the way that we do. So here's what this currently looks like. We have what we call our good side. And that's the side that we show to the world. That's the side that we use to gain approval and to have feelings of self-worth. And then we have our bad side. That's our dark side. That's the side we keep repressed and hidden. And that's the side that many like to call the shadow. So the good side is what gives us value and worth. And bear in mind that that value and worth usually comes from the outside world. And then the bad side robs us of value and worth. It causes us pain. It makes us feel terrible. Therefore, we keep it hidden and buried because we don't like to feel pain, right? We generally don't want to feel it, and we usually don't even want to know about it. Now, I personally don't like to refer to that dark side, that so-called bad side, as the shadow self, and here's why. I think when you do that, you might run a risk of perpetuating the sense of a divided self. So let me offer you another way that you can look at this. You can look at your entire experience on this planet as existing along a spectrum of light to darkness. Now, in truth, you are all light. You are 100% light. But in this reality, that light gets repressed in all sorts of ways. Wherever your light is repressed and to whatever degree, you will experience darkness. You will experience pain. This is why they have the phrase called the dark night of the soul. This experience occurs when circumstances force you to visit the darkest side of your experience. Now, when you choose to look at this entire thing as a spectrum of light to darkness, it changes your orientation. It removes the illusion of duality. It removes the illusion of two separate selves that need to be reconciled. Instead of trying to reconcile two parts of yourself, the darkness and the light, you are understanding that you are all light and that there are many areas in your experience where your light has been repressed. Now, your light can get repressed in many, many ways. It can be repressed through some kind of trauma. It can be repressed by some form of abuse from an external source. It can be repressed by conditioning. Just whatever ways that you feel your expression of who you really are has been shut down. That's an example of your light being repressed. So here's a thought. Instead of calling it shadow work, you could call it light work. And that would consist of you allowing your light to expand into those areas of darkness so that those areas can be transmuted back into light. Now, here's something important to keep in mind. When you are true to your heart, it's going to instantly illuminate any areas of your life where you have not been true to yourself. So the process of moving through the spectrum of what I'm calling light work starts with illumination, and then it moves into transmutation, transmuting the areas of darkness in your experience back into light. So here's how simple life really can be in this physical world. You are in truth a being of pure, unadulterated light who seeks to express yourself here or wherever else you might be in this universe. And when you understand that, you will then find yourself on a singular path of transmutation. Wherever your light is blocked, wherever you are unable to express the love that you are, that's an area that needs to be attended to. It's really just that simple. Now, we here tend to come up with all of these convoluted, complicated, psychological ways of dealing with this. We deal with it as though it's a problem we have with ourselves, but it's not. We actually don't have any problem with ourselves and who we really are. What we have a problem with is expressing the totality of who we really are in a very messed up, divided reality. We're actually not psychologically deficient. We just need to understand that it's the nature of this reality that's causing us all the problems. See, our true self doesn't have any problems. However, we enter this physical reality, we're hit with that resistance of the physical world, then we have to press through and try to express through the false self, which is the ego, which then projects its duality into a lifetime of experiencing opposites. So when you understand that the simplicity of our situation, that the problem is actually with the reality that we're trying to express ourselves through, and you understand it's really just about resistance to your light, then your path of evolution becomes very simple. It becomes very singular, and you can look at it as a spectrum of light to darkness. So you want to express your light. Wherever that light runs into resistance, there's darkness there. That area of darkness needs to be attended to. It needs to be illuminated. It needs to be seen and addressed. And then you express through that, you transmute it, and you move on in your evolution. Now, I know I've given you a lot to think about. So if this resonates for you, I really encourage you to watch this video again and maybe even several times if you feel that would be helpful. Because you might find that the more you try these ideas on, the more you're going to learn about yourself and your life, and the more empowered you're going to feel at accelerating your evolution and entering a truly advanced path of ascension. So if you enjoyed this video and found some value in it, please give it a thumbs up and share it out with anyone else who you think would benefit from this information. And be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I am here every Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday with new videos to support you on your awakening and ascension journey. And with that, I'm sending you loads of love, light, and positive energy. I will see you in the next video. Namaste.